We're at Gamescom and we are chatting historically accurate shooter Isonzo, and I'm here with Jos, creative director on the game.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
I think one of the interesting things that we'd like to start with is the WW1 series has been going for a few years now, but it's maybe kind of like not as well known as the bigger shooters like Battlefield. So I'd like what kind of shooter is Isonzo?
Well, the WW1 game series is a hardcore, realistic shooter series of games. It focuses on WW1 as a team, and each installment of the game tries to craft a game around the front that it represents. For Verdun, we chose to really represent the trench warfare back and forth. Tannenberg to really the encirclement battles of the Eastern Front. And for Isonzo, we try to represent the mountain warfare and all the aspects that come with that.
So, as you said there, like Isonzo is interesting because it's set like in the Italian Alps, right? Which is a very, very different, like we've seen a few WW1 games in the past which tend to focus on much flatter ground. The Italian Alps is a very different battlefield. So can you explain kind of what challenges does a player get by being in that environment?
Verticality. The Italians typically fight uphill most of the battles that we represent. So the Austrians have to literally have the high ground. That creates a very interesting dynamic where, as an Italian, you constantly have to be careful where you walk, and the danger can come from many directions. Even
so, like at that altitude, is there still an element of that trench warfare, or is it a completely different experience?
No, the trench warfare is still very much part of of all our games. The specifics of the Italian front are, of course, that the trenches are all sort of chiseled out in the landscape. Yeah, they're still there. They haven't been eroded like on the Western Front. It sort of erodes over time, and here it's very much still present.
I imagine the fact that they're still there must have been very useful for you being able to visit and do the historical accuracy of these maps.
Exactly, yeah. We visited several of the locations where we've been making into maps. For this game, we really chose to make the levels as accurate as is possible within, of course, the realms of what you can do in a first-person multiplayer shooter experience.
And in terms of that historical accuracy, the reputation of the series is that it's quite a realistic to the era, which obviously means that the tactics that were used in WW1 is very, very different to other wars. It's much more kind of wars of attrition and slightly slower paced. So what kind of tactics will players be using as they fight in these maps?
For the levels is that each map is divided into 2 to 6 sectors deep. The defenders can first fortify their sector, and after a certain amount of time, the attackers let loose on the sector. What you will get is that the attacking side has to cross their trenches in large numbers because they get picked off quite easily with machine guns that have been placed by the defenders. Tactics going on there of trying to cut the barbed wire under fire, throw grenades, suppress the machine guns, fire mortar rounds, and then advancing. So you have a lot of that going on. That sort of simulates the trench warfare, simulates the mountain warfare through the maps, and the attackers, of course, have to go through all the sectors to win.
It sounds incredibly stressful, which is, what obviously all wars are very stressful, but WW1 in particular was known for being, so horrendous. And it sounds like you've really captured kind of the intensity of these battles. In terms of where you've drawn like your inspiration from, kind of what actual battles will we be able to recreate in the game?
The Italian front stretches from Switzerland to the Adriatic Sea. And most of the battles took place near the coast, on an area known as the Carso. It's a very arid and desolate, rocky landscape. And we really try to put a lot of emphasis on the battles that took place there.
The other thing about WW1 we know is that obviously kind of large amounts of troops that are involved in this. You've mentioned obviously that these are battles that had maybe less troops than we'd expect maybe on a Western Front offensive. But how does that translate into player counts? How many players are going to be per match?
Yeah, so it's always a challenge of representing these battles with hundreds of thousands of troops in a multiplayer environment in an accurate way. Our maps are relatively condensed, but very intense. For Isonzo, we felt that 48 players is actually already enough simulate the intensity of combat.
One of the other things that's really important, obviously, in a shooter is how good your gunplay is. Can players that are kind of familiar with games expect an improved combat experience this time around?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We created a new system for inverse kinematics to really make the guns a lot smoother in terms of, if you're running around and from sprinting into sight, that's a very smooth transition.
The attention to detail is incredible. It's so I was recently at a war museum and I've seen these things in real life, and being able to see them in the game is very, very cool. But it's not just the weapons that are historically accurate. We'll go down to the fact that you've got a historically inspired flare system, right? right?
Yeah, the flare system is based on also on history. Of course, you had a very complex flare system in real life where you fired different colors of flares and different formations. Fire 2 flares to signal that we've captured a trench, 3 flares for more artillery fire. I mean, there's a whole handbook with the signal core exactly what this all meant. We've condensed it in our game to a somewhat simplified system where you can fire 1 flare and it's sort of where it hangs in the air. Directly below it is the designated target for officers to use as a point to call in their barrages.
And then in terms of, obviously it's a multiplayer shooter. It's very much its own style of multiplayer shooter. But there are things that people that have played other games like Battlefield and stuff that will find familiar. I guess the class system is probably the one that might make sense to someone who's never played a World War I game before, but how do your classes work? Have they got like a unique slant to them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a unique Mountaineer class, which is able to traverse the level faster and has unique weaponry and, of course, a unique appearance. For the rest of the classes, we have a dedicated Engineer class for building, Assault class, which can carry more grenades. A Rifleman class is dedicated to operating rifles more accurately. There's only 2 officers available per side. Officers can set points, attack specific areas on the map, as well as using their trench whistle, call in more reinforcements at a given time. The spawn time gets reduced to 0. But there are limits to the amount of people that can take a certain class. So the Sniper class, for instance, is limited to only 3 or 4 players. Within that, we also have a limit on the amount of weapons that can be used. So in order to make sure not everybody picks the Sniper, the scoped sniper rifle, there's a limit on the amount of people that can actually use the scoped sniper rifle. So otherwise, with the Italian front being so open, the snipers would range between everybody would walk around with a sniper scope. It's really overpowered. So we really try to find the balance here between historical accuracy and gameplay fun as well. Of course, not everybody had a scope rifle to begin with, so those were rare. Same goes for the submachine guns. So I say submachine, light machine gun, the Villa Perosa, which had odd dual magazine guns, felt sort of in between submachine gun and light machine gun. But those are limited as well in there.
I'm just pleased that you're curbing the snipers because they're often my worst nightmare. Jos, thank you so much for telling us everything about Isonzo. When can we expect it?
September 13th on PC, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox.
Thank you, Jos. It's been great to chat to you.